Hey everyone, how you doing today? It's Tanya from Royal City Nursery, and we are going to show you how to make a wreath. And I know you think, yeah, I don't want to make one from scratch. Beautiful. We are not starting from 100% scratch, but what we are going to do is make a traditional basic wreath look like a florist quality wreath. And I'm going to talk through the shapes, the sizes, some of the proportions, and how it is we actually do that. So when you're getting your kits ready, there's a few things you need. So certainly a pair of garden shears or secateurs. So hopefully you've got a good set with you. If you've picked up a kit from us, that does not come included. So you need to make sure you get yours out of the garden shed. And then absolutely, you need a wreath. So today we're going to work on a noble fir wreath. I've already got half of this done, so then you can see what's going on. But you can still get an idea on this half of what we're starting with. And again, we're just starting with the basic green wreath. There's no pine cones, there's no anything else. Why do we use noble fir? Because it smells amazing. So it's one of my favorite wreaths. So we're gonna set this aside and we'll deal with this a little bit later on. There we go. Some of the other things that you're going to find in your kit are going to be white pine, which is this particular branch. So you see how flexible and kind of floppy this is? This is one of our native pines. Super, super soft, but also a little bit sappy and gooey. So if you take a look at it, I'm working on my kitchen table, but I've put a sheet of plastic on the table just to protect it and makes it easier for cleanup. So whether I use a pine branch like this or a pine branch like this, doesn't particularly matter. Both work, and I'll show you how to cut them into bunches very, very soon. I'm also going to be using a YWCA, so this is a shade-loving evergreen that you're going to find usually outside in your foundations. We're using boxwood. This particular one happens to be a green boxwood. We're using dogwood as well, so this is a red stem dogwood, and whether that's one that you've taken and cut from your flower garden or whether it's one you've purchased, again, in terms of branch, the awesome part about doing a wreath is when we think about it, we're going to need bits that are only this big. So it doesn't matter that the twigs are all kind of sideways and a little bit bent or a little bit kind of funky. And we'll show you how to cut around that so you make the most of your materials. The other things that you're going to need is I've just got some what we call doodahs. So I've got a few different sparkly bits. I've got 3 copper ones and 2 red ones. I'm going to set these aside. We'll use these at the end. And we want to make sure when you are building your wreath that you're thinking about materials that can tolerate being outdoors. So you can use berry stems, you can use lights. We'll actually put lights on this at the very end just so you can see how it's done. You can use whatever greens you like. But we want to make sure we're using 3 or 4, this many fingers, different kinds of greens. Again, it can be a twig and a couple of evergreens. We just want some textural differences. So in order to cut this, and you'll notice I've already started. I've got a bit of a head start. So I've cut the white pine. I've cut the yews. And we're about to cut the boxwoods. So with the boxwoods, when we cut, there we go. I want to cut these pieces into about 4 to 6 inches in length. And the other thing I want to do is we are going to cut just above a leaf or just above a node. So what that means is there's no stumps, right? I want to keep those stems and stumps to a minimum because I want these leaves to cover it up. So all I'm going to do is start at the top of the branch and work my way down. Again, the pieces are going to be about 4 to 6 inches in length. And if they're kind of funny, it doesn't matter because by the time we're done, you'll never ever notice it. And you'll notice that we've actually stripped the branch. And this branch is still decent. So we're still going to use this piece. I'm just going to shorten it a bit in here. The other thing you do need, and I should mention, is you do need a spot for garbage. Because in a minute, you're going to have stuff everywhere. So we're going to organize ourselves so we can see what's going on. So we've got our boxwood pile. For the yews, we want to do the same thing, about 4 to 6 inches in length. And when you get to some of the yews, you've got a whole bunch of little branchlets. And what I'm going to do is take this center part out, like that. So now I still have a useful piece, and it actually looks like a little itty bitty shrub all by itself. And again, I can keep going down the branch, and this branch is fairly stiff. That's okay. There we go. So it gives me a couple of good pieces. The awesome part about doing your wreaths is do your urns first, and then the parts that you cut off for your urns, a lot of times, are the right size for a wreath. For the dogwoods, we want to cut these stems at least 6 inches in length. If we want to be on trend, you actually want them a little bit longer, in about the 8-inch range. So if you want to make it a bit more natural, then 8 inches it is. If you want to be a little bit more subtle, we want to be closer to 6. And all I'm doing is just running down the branch from top to bottom and cutting it up. And the last one we're going to cut up is our pine. So this one's kind of easy, right? If we take a look at our white pine, we already have a whole bunch of little tufts. So I can take these guys, these little side branches off. I'm going to shorten this one, because who needs that much stem in our wreath? And again, we want to aim for pieces that are about 4 to 6 inches in length. If you've got a little bit, so like these guys here, we've got 2 little bits on either side. What I can do is take the stump out in the middle, and now I've got a reasonable piece that I can cut to length. So if I set this aside, the next thing I'm going to do is actually create a bunch of little itty bitty bundles. So I've got a couple of different ones going. This one is dogwood and boxwood. And in this one's a little bit harder to see. This one's got yew, and the pine is buried right in the middle there. All together, we're going to make about 8 to 10 bunches of each. Now, you can make the bunches a little bit bigger and do less, or you can make the bunches a little bit smaller and do more, but totally depends on what you want your wreath to look like in the end. So to build these bunches, let's start with our dogwood and our boxwood. What I'm going to do is start with a couple of twigs in the back, and you got to watch what your thumbs are doing. So with this, I want to make sure that my thumb is very close to the bottom, and I'm going to build from the back up. So the dogwoods are going in first because they're going to be at the back of the bunch. Boxwoods go in on top. See what happened to my thumb? Right, the boxwoods are sitting on top of the dogwood. I can add a couple more in there. So if I want a small bunch, I do something like that. If I want a bigger bunch, I'm just going to add another piece of dogwood on the top. So I've actually, in this little itty bitty bunch, I've got 2 to 3 pieces of boxwood and 3 pieces of dogwood. The other thing you're going to need when we're doing this is either some floral wire, but I gotta say we gave up on floral wire a little bit ago, and we use zip ties. So we go through a ton of these. So hopefully you've got a few of them around. You can get them at any hardware store. And you'll note what I'm doing with my thumb. My thumb still has not left this bunch. So I want to make sure, again, when I've got zip tie on, that it's good and tight, and I've got all the bottom stems. When I think it's tight enough, I want to give it an extra push, because I want to make sure that when we open and close the door, these bunches aren't going to fall apart. So I'm going to get you to do a bunch of these, bunches. So again, we're shooting for 6 at a minimum, 8 to 10 would be ideal. So if you can put a few of those together. Our next set of bunches is going to be our yews and our pine. So with this one, we're going to follow the same kind of pattern. So same pattern as before. So watch my thumb. Thumb stays at the bottom. We're going to build up from the back. So I've got a backing of yew, and then pine goes in. Couple of bunches of pine. And when we take a look at this, one of the things you want to notice is sometimes you get a whole bunch of stem showing up. And you know what? That's okay, because by the time you're done, you never see it. Or we take a little itty bitty piece of you and put that on the front. So then you don't see any of the stems at all. We're going to wire those together. Again, if you're using, you can totally do this with floral wire. You just have to make sure that your wire is very, very tight. And every single bunch you do, you need to do the drop test too. Got a bunch of bunches ready to go. So now let's get the wreath over here so you can see what we're doing, and we'll start to get stuff added in. So with the wreath, again, you'll see that I've got half of this wreath already set up, and they already have some bunches in. When we think about layout, all I did was alternate. So I've got pine and yew, boxwood and dogwood, and then there's a pine and yew and a boxwood and dogwood, and so on and so on and so on. So if you alternate all the way down, it makes it a ton easier on the end. How do we insert them? How do we know where they need to be? Easiest thing to do is actually lay them right on top. So you can lay, everything out, and then make sure it's actually where you want it to go. So all I've done right now, the bottom half of this just has the bunches laid on. So yeah, I've got the spacing right. This gives me the opportunity to change the spacing as much as I want or as little as I want. I can bunch them up all on one side and make something super modern. I can spread them out and go all the way around. Totally up to you. So let's get creative. To insert your bunch, that's the next part. When you look at how the wreath is actually constructed, you're going to find that the branches all go one way. Right? So they're all folding back the same way. So when we go to insert our bunch, all I'm going to do is lift up the wreath a little bit and shove it in down here. Is it in the right spot? Sure it is. Why not? But I can't just do that. I need to actually tack it in. So this needs to get tacked into, there we go. I'm going to find a branch, and I'm going to zip tie it on. And at this point, I'm not going to worry about any of the tails, the zip tie tails. We'll deal with that at the very end, because quite frankly, the only ones we're going to cut are the ones that we see. We don't need to cut everything. And I'm just going to work around, same thing in terms of inserting. So I'm going to lift up the wreath. The stems of my bunch go inside, and there we go. I'm going to attach it onto one of the branches that's in the back. And then I zip tie the whole thing together. Now, every once in a while, you need to do the scary thing when you're building a wreath, and you need to do the shake test. Right? Because you don't want to put this on your front door and have that happen. Stuff happens all the time. So every once in a while, you got to lift it up and shake it out so you can make sure that you've actually got it where it's supposed to be. So if they fall out, no big deal. We're just going to put these right back in, and I'm going to hang it up and show you how to finish it off. So awesome, we've got all our bunches in, and you can see I've just tucked it up on, I've got a wreath hanger that I'm working with. And if you don't have a wreath hanging stand like this, that's okay. Maybe you tuck it on a door, or just hang it up on a wall so you can actually see what you're doing, because sometimes it's a little bit easier. You need to flip it up. And at this point, take a look at it. If we need to do another bunch or two, this is the opportunity for that. And if we're satisfied with where they are, what we're going to do is add a little bit of color and a little bit of zing. So these guys, and again, here at the Garden Center, we lovingly call these a doodah. So I've got 5 of them that we're going to add. For me personally, I kind of prefer, I generally tend to do most of my work off to the side. So all I'm going to do right now is insert it so I can see what's going on, and then we're going to attach them the same way that we did the bunches. So let's get those guys in there. And you'll notice when I set these up, I actually have the loops coming forward. For me, it gives it a little bit of depth. So you can do them that way, you can do them this way, whatever the heck kind of floats your boat. So no problem. The other thing you can do is put them in upside down. Just for something a little bit different. So with our doodahs, when we put them all together like this, there we go, what it does is focus the eye into one spot. If you have a doodah all the way around, the whole wreath becomes the focus. But if you want to do something that's a little bit more restful for your eye, get your eye to focus in one spot. So once you're happy with the placement of those, it's exactly the same as the bunches. We're going to grab our zip tie. We're going to go in and we're going to tie it to the back. There you go. Once they're tied in, you can easily, if you like, cut the stems and now I've got another sparkly stick that I can add in. So it totally depends on what your comfort level is and what your design is. Again, we want you to get creative, and this should have personality just like you. Just do a really quick run around, take off all the little black bits from the cable ties that we can see, and in a minute we'll be putting the lights on just for an added bonus. When it's upright like this. So this is the bonus piece. So these are battery operated lights. We have them at the garden center. They're indoor, outdoor, and they come with a timer. So when I turn them on, they're on for 6 hours and off for 18. So it means I need to turn them on once. And I turn them on at whatever time I want them to come on normally. It's plenty long enough. The very first thing I need to do is get the battery pack in the back. And I'll deal with that a little bit later. Right now I've just got it hung on the hook. And now I can do a little bit of layout. We generally always want to work on our lights when they're actually lit because you can actually see what's going on. Now you notice right now, I'm just moving really quickly to get this zigzagged through and around because I want to make sure I use up the entire light string. And once I've got it laid out the way I like, I can go back and actually get them shoved in. Let's get him in there. Very last thing we need to do is just tack the battery pack in the back, but you've got these little wonder dudes. You've got the cable ties to do that. So in a short order, we've got a decorated wreath for your front door or for anywhere, indoors or out. If you're going to keep it indoors, just make sure you mist it on a regular basis and it's inside for no more than 2 weeks. So you don't want to bring it in until very, very close to Christmas. So hopefully that helps, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks very much.